from Ren and Stimpy is a possessed serial killer. Let's speak from the facts. Throughout the series, Ren is a psycho, as shown in Ren Seeks Help and Stimpy's fan club. This theory originates from one scene from Stimpy's fan club, when Ren gets jealous and bitter and goes complete psycho. He says some intriguing things like the dirt won't come off, meaning he feels guilt for the lives he has taken, and the most darkest line from that episode being, "With these hands I hold the fate of millions," that kind of man's that he is a possible serial killer but possessed, as a dog may be a stereotype of child's play that could possibly be true. Slasher movies take place in the same universe. I've seen my fair share of them and always wondered why people didn't seem to be freaked out by serial killers that seemingly couldn't die or be shot in the head and not be fazed. Then I saw Freddy vs. Jason and I got thinking. It's already been confirmed that Freddy and Jason do exist in the same universe. Why not all of them? It would explain why no one is scared of them and/or not believe, until it's too late. What if surviving one slasher marks you as a victim for another as well? You survived Chucky, just to be killed by Michael. It would be a real twist of fate, like how horror likes to do them. Hogan's Heroes, an alternate history where World War II dragged them into the 1950s. First off, for those of you who don't know, Hogan's Heroes was a comedy set in a World War II German prisoner of war camp. It involved Colonel Robert Hogan leading his band of prisoners on insane, harebrained schemes to help other prisoners of war escape and to sabotage the German war effort. It also seems to take place in an alternate history where instead of ending in 1945, the war just dragged on and on, possibly into the 1950s. The first piece of evidence is simply the length of the series. In the first episode, they clearly state that it is 1942. The show then goes on for 6 seasons. In each season, we see indications that a full year has passed, such as the progression of the seasons, with each season of the series showing both warm summer weather and cold winter weather in an ordered progression. This means that the show spans 6 years starting in 1942, which means that the series finale was in 1947 or 1948, 2 or 3 years after the war was supposed to be over. Another piece of evidence is in the 3rd season, when a Gestapo officer starts asking Hogan about the Manhattan Project, which ran from 1942 through 1946. In Season 2, a German atomic scientist wants to escape with the help of Hogan and his crew, because he was getting real close to cracking the secrets of the atom bomb and he didn't want the Germans to have it. This indicates that in Seasons 2 and 3, they were near the end of the Manhattan Project, which would make it about 1944. This means that the war should have been wrapping up in Season 3, Season 4 at the latest, yet it went on 4 years afterwards. My final piece of evidence is Speedy Gonzales. There are multiple points throughout the show where they mention the fast-footed cartoon character, but that shouldn't have been possible. Speed Gonzales only premiered in 1953. Even if the Germans were allowing prisoners of war to watch the latest American cartoons, the war was supposed to end 8 years before the cartoon began. All of this points to the show being set in a horribly twisted version of reality where World War II started normally, but instead of ending in 1945, it kept going until at least 1948. Possibly even past 1953. And why Dale hates Bobby King of the Hill. It has been shown in some King of the Hill episodes that Dale dislikes Bobby, such as the time that Dale laughed at Joseph's jokes about Bobby being a rodeo clown. Well, I have a reason why. In Season 1 Episode 12 Plastic White Female, in the ending scene when Bobby spins the bottle it lands on Nancy. Bobby then leaps at Nancy and kisses her. The episode then cut to black. And we all know how protective Dale is with his family, and how he never forgets anything. The Grinch 2000 Mayor Mayhew was deliberately goading the Grinch into going on a rampage. Inspired by a WMG on TV tropes, Mayor Mayhew had it all planned from the start, in case the Grinch did show up to the jubilation. He knew fully damn well that the Grinch was volatile. Remember the rampage in the school, when he was a kid, and deliberately orchestrated everything to go as it did in order to provoke the Grinch. He forced all the jubilation events onto him, like being force-fed pudding and whatever the hell that Einstein-looking guy had, knowing fully damn well that the Grinch was not prepared for them. He proposed to Martha Mayhew there in front of him, and gifted him a razor to bring back all those horrible memories. Coincidence? I think not. The whole thing was just an opportunistic ploy for the mayor to spread even more slander and prejudice against the Grinch, and to keep him separated from the House and Harville for good. All out of his own hatred and jealousy of Grinch. So in short, the scumbag knew exactly what he was doing. The Grinch was walking into a trap from the get-go. Sesame Street. The entire street is SCP. If you're not familiar with SCP, it's a fictional online organization about containing monsters, kind of like Area 51. Think about it, a street in New York full of child-friendly characters, some real people and others mostly fuzzy monsters, all with big mouths. A giant birdman, a hairy anteater-like elephant, a vampire, and some human muppets with weird skin colors, big mouths, and oddly shaped heads like Bert and Ernie. All these characters are creatures from the SCP organization that have been trained to basically be harmless and friendly. Sesame Street is all about teaching basic things to kids, so they have these creatures on the show learn how to be like people, get taught at a young age to be more tame and intelligent. They changed their appearances via their shape-shifting powers to be like friendly puppets. SCP, being a street on New York, acts as a disguise, as the New York street is an unlikely place for such an organization. Found since Part 1. Friday the 13th theory. Jason was the killer, not Pamela Voorhees. My first piece of evidence is when Pamela drives there in the film. This directly after Brenda is thrown the window. We do not hear panting after, no footsteps either. My assumption is that Jason went to the side of the window hoping to get Alice through the window, but seconds later Pamela shows up. She would have had to run to the Jeep, pull away, then show up again in a few seconds. Alice runs out, Jason about to pursue, but his mom pulls up, so he stops. Another piece evidence. If she was the killer, she would have immediately killed Alice, but she waits until a psychotic episode to attack. This also points to her one kill, Steve Christie. It was her that killed him. After all, he did hire the counselors that ignored Jason. Also the poodle in the attic at the beginning. Why would they deny what they were doing? If it was an adult, they would go to a child. Another factor is that she heard Jason's voice in her head, then spoke out loud. If this is true, wouldn't we hear her speak throughout the movie? The girl in the woods was chased by Pamela, but her intentions were to lead her away from camp. She lost her, and then Jason caught her. So she went to make sure others were out of the camp, not dead. Again, would she have the strength to throw Brenda and push the arrow through the bed without breathing heavily? That's not just a theory of Friday the 13th theory. Thanks for reading. Dark City, the Matrix Double Theory. The world of Dark City is an earlier version of the Matrix. Apologies if these theories already exist somewhere. If they do, I haven't seen them. Spoilers to follow. Naturally, the first theory is that the Dark City is an earlier version of the Matrix, when the machines were still figuring some things out. If you're not familiar with Dark City, a portion of humanity was traveling through space in a city, unaware of their circumstances, while an alien race experimented on them by swapping their memories around. The second theory is that when Neo ends his meeting with the architect, he never returns to the real world. I'm fairly certain this theory exists somewhere, but maybe not exactly like this or in conjunction with the first theory. The basis for the first theory is this: machines are always learning, so not every version of the Matrix would look the same. The Dark City version would be a very early version, the beta test after their first two failures, where the Oracle came up with the idea for the one. John Murdoch is the first one. He can change his environment at will, fly, etc., once he learns how to use his power. Dr. Scrubber as the Oracle. He sets Murdoch on the path of the one. The strangers are programs. Mr. Hand is a match for Smith, a foil for the one, but I actually think he's the Merovingian, who malfunctioned and chose to hide out rather than be deleted. Shell Beach is Zion, a place to hope for and believe in. If Zion falls, all is lost. John Murdoch followed the path of the one to nearly the same end Neo did, defeating the strangers and machines and creating his own Shell Beach, which wasn't really real. This created a template for the machines to use for the full version of the Matrix. But for the machines to reach their goals, humanity would have to stick to the script. The problem is choice. The architect said Neo's version of the Matrix was the sixth, not counting the first two attempts, which didn't have anomalies, referring to a one. The third attempt was the testing ground. Dark City, 99% of humanity accepted what they were given, but the architect is a perfectionist and demanded 100%. They needed the reality that the other 1% would accept, and Murdoch showed them the way. What if I told you the architect wanted Neo to go through door number 2? He wants a world without choice, so why would he create a game that he could lose? The four ones, after Murdoch chose to return to the source and reset the whole thing. Neo chose to fight, and he would go on to create the reality that the other fighters would accept. Passing through the second door uploaded Neo's knowledge of the real world to create a second system. Morpheus wakes up in the second virtual reality. The Link who wakes him up is a program based on Morpheus and Neo's memories of Link. The real Link died when machines attacked the ship and created the real world VR for anyone still plugged in. Locke's defense of Zion was a catastrophic failure, and anyone who survived was captured, inserted in the real world VR, and had their memories altered a bit so they'd only remember losing the battle, not what happened after. Now comes the true function of the One, which Neo finally fulfills after 4 previous failures. He fights and reaches a compromise with the machines so that the rebels will live peaceably in the second VR without questioning it. They need to believe they fought and died for that peace, thereby earning it. 13th, Jason and Pamela were both killers. I know there are theories on the internet that Jason was indeed the killer in the first installation of the Friday the 13th series, but I haven't seen any that seem to cover the points I'm about to bring up. I'd love to know what you think. So let's get right into it. 1957, Jason drowns 11-year-old Jason Voorhees is attending Camp Crystal Lake, where his mother, Pamela, is also employed as a cook. Jason has special needs and is teased by other children for his condition and appearance. One day during the summer, Jason finds himself in the water, though he can't swim. The story here remains somewhat the same. The counselors are too busy partying/drinking to notice Jason is in any danger. But it is shown Pamela has memories of Jason thrashing in the water. So, of course, as any parent would, she dives in to save him. If the counselors are too busy to notice a boy shouting for help in the water, they probably won't notice someone else jumping in to save him. Pamela is furious at this lack of care. Her son, who she clearly states or just believes, whether it's actually true or not could be debated, needs constant attention and care, almost died due to neglect. She brings this up to the camp owners and withdraws Jason from the camp, also leaving her position as cook. The counselors are only lightly reprimanded and Jason disappears without a word, causing rumors to spread. It goes from a boy almost drowned to a boy drowned in the lake, as the rumor passes through the camp. Pamela takes Jason back to their home, where her withering mental state takes another large hit from the events, and she essentially locks Jason away with her. 1958 first scene of the film. The camp opens for another summer. Pamela, either not invited or having no interest in returning, is furious that everything can carry on as normal when her son was almost left for dead with no repercussions. She decides to have the camp shut for good and returns to murder the two counselors. This, mixed with the rumor of her son dying due to negligence, is the final nail in the coffin for Camp Crystal Lake, and it is shut indefinitely. This is also why Pamela continues with the theory that her son has died and keeps him locked away. It wouldn't be unlike Pamela to want to protect Jason from the entire world. 1979. The film begins. 21 years pass. Over this time, Pamela teaches Jason how to survive without the aid of others, by showing him how to hunt and kill animals and how to cook them, using her previous camp cook experience. They can even use the large woodland area in Camp Crystal Lake, as it is now disused. Jason is rarely away from his mother and is now a grown man. Camp Crystal Lake attempts to reopen several times over the 20-odd years, but is plagued by issues of mysterious fires, of course, set by Pamela, as she learns they are attempting to reopen the camp. She refuses to let the camp reopen and gain profit after how they treated her son. When she learns the son of the original owner is stepping in to reopen with a large budget, she realizes that she will have to do something big to make sure that not only the camp stays shut, but she can exact her revenge. Pamela takes her Jeep with Jason hidden in the back, which is why she keeps the back compartment up. She picks up Annie on the way to Camp Crystal Lake. When Annie becomes suspicious of Pamela, she jumps from the Jeep and runs into the woods with Jason pursuing her. This explains why, when she is confronted with her killer, as she falls to the floor, she is so scared and threatened. If it was Pamela, she might have felt like she could run, but seeing the towering and deformed Jason has shocked her. When we briefly see the killer, there is no possible way it could be a woman of Pamela's stature. The person seems very broad and tall. At least taller than Annie, as she appears to look up to her killer, even when she's back on her feet. Also, notice the plaid shirt the killer is wearing. It's in similar fashion to the shirt Jason wears in Friday the 13th Part 2. It could be they were taken from the same person, or possibly even from Jason's father, though he doesn't have much mention in the film series. Jack's head and forced an arrow through a mattress in his neck. While a sharp arrow may have no troubles with this, keeping him detained with a single hand should prove difficult for Pamela. Deaths I do believe could have been made by Pamela are, not surprisingly, the off-screen deaths. Specifically Ned, who is shown to have his throat slit. Meeting Pamela wasn't too shocking or threatening, giving her ample opportunity to slash his throat while his guard is down. Bill also could have been murdered with the element of surprise, while attempting to reinstate the power to the camp. He is also seen to be struck with many arrows. While he could have just been stabbed point blank with them, as it appears obvious that Pamela likes to cause stress to the victims by leaving the corpses in horrifying states, it's also possible some arrows were fired into him, furthering Pamela/Jason's proficiency with hunting. Another murder I do believe was carried out by Pamela was the camp owner Steve. Seeing her in the woods didn't seem to faze him at all. There may be a chance he knows Pamela, as she previously worked at camp, but the only age we can go off for this character is his actor's age, who was 35 at the time of filming. This means he was 13 at the time of Jason's apparent drowning and 14 when the Counsellors were murdered. With Pamela being the cook, there's a good chance he won't recognize her now, especially in the dark woods. There is also a chance he didn't attend camp at all at this time. Again, Steve's relaxed demeanor and lack of concern prior to his death is probably because he'd found Pamela in the woods and was just checking if she was okay. Before Pamela stabbed him, Jason was more likely to have murdered people like Jack, as previously stated, and Marcy, who appears terrified merely at the appearance of her attacker. Again, someone brandishing an axe might be scary enough, as it is, but with Pamela's small stature and frame, it seems odd for these able-bodied young people to not feel like they'd be able to overpower her. Seeing a large man with a deformed face is more than likely to cause this reaction. I also feel like Jason would be far more proficient with an axe than Pamela, as we see her struggle with a machete later on in the film. But more on that in a bit. The final fight, Alice versus Pamela. Why did Pamela decide to feebly fight the final girl, Alice? While talking to her, you can see Pamela recall her son struggling in the water. The memories throw her into a rage, causing her to attack Alice on the spot. It's more likely any kill she did perform, she strategically planned out and took a surprise option, other than a head-on approach. During the confrontation, we see the bodies of Counsellors around the camp. Looking at how a lot of bodies are moved and hung, it seems unlikely Pamela could have set this up alone. When you watch her fight, you can see her struggle to push Alice around. She even seems to have issues wielding a machete. It makes sense she would have Jason with her to help move the bodies and do things like suspend them from trees, or throw them through windows. Something Pamela seems physically incapable of doing. But now on to the finale. If this theory is correct, Jason should be present for the final fight. As he is probably ordered around by his mother, he might not have felt confident enough to step into her fight, or he may have just been too far or too late to act on it. He sees Alice decapitate his mother, which frightens him. He only knows life with Pamela looking over him. Instead of extracting his revenge on Alice immediately, he instead retreats into the woods. She also at this point would have pushed her boat out into the lake, and the canon of this film is Jason cannot swim, so won't be able to reach her. He returns later in the night, when Alice passes out in the boat and retrieves his mother's sweater and her decapitated head. The only part he truly recognizes of her, Alice, is now in a sanatorium for a few months. Jason has stayed at Camp Crystal Lake. He isn't found by the police. No further search is carried out. Alice reports that Pamela strategically murdered her friends and colleagues. The police officer claims no boy was found, implying they did search the lake. This was probably in search of Pamela's missing head. Even if the woods were searched, Jason's shack wouldn't be constructed yet, so he could probably evade people with his series' proven stealth. Jason survives on hunting wildlife and any food left behind by the previous counselors. In this time, he also constructs his shack, seen in Friday the 13th Part 2, 1979. Several months later, Alice is released from the sanatorium and, against her parents' wishes, moves back to Crystal Lake in an attempt to overcome her fears. This is, as we know, where Jason hunts her down to murder her. But based on this theory, how did Jason know where to go? My answer for that is simple: Crystal Lake, a small town in New Jersey. It's very possible Pamela knew of the counselors and their whereabouts before the events. Even if her exact address wasn't known, I believe Jason could have stalked Alice for her whereabouts and, using tactics he has learned from his mother, stressed his victim by leaving the head of his deceased mother in Alice's fridge before killing her. So this is my theory. I think it explains a lot of the inconsistencies between the first and second film, and honestly, it was really fun writing it up. If you either agree or disagree with some points, I'd love to hear them. Thanks for reading. I have a buddy who told me to post this here, so I'm finally doing it now. I was talking to him about how my favorite power-up and transformation is Kaioken and whatnot, so after some time I've devised a theory now. Kaioken is just a simple power multiplier that focuses on ki control, which is why Goku can use it with Super Saiyan Blue. But what if Kaioken was meant to be so much more? Because what if King Kai at least knew of Xeno before even knowing Goku existed, and probably knew Xeno was into some sick games like messing with people's lives in various universes? So what if Kaioken was meant to be a catalyst for Universe 7 to ascend to a higher state of being or whatever, so they'd be exempt from Xenos games such as the Tournament of Power? But King Kai messed up somewhere along the process, and that's why Kaioken causes extreme stress on the user's body, and it wasn't originally meant to do that. Since he messed it up, he figured he would test it on someone anyway to see how they handle it, this person being Goku. Why he never bothered to fix it will be unknown. But what if Kaioken was meant to be so much more? 300 years before the start of Dragon Ball, King Piccolo attempted to conquer Earth. This brought him into conflict with the martial artists of this era, Master Mutato and his students, which included Master Roshi and Master Shen, and just like in the King Piccolo saga, King Piccolo also created several offspring like tambourine, cymbal, drum and piano. Master Shen and Master Roshi were actually able to kill all of King Piccolo's children at the time, which of course led to them facing King Piccolo himself alongside their master Mutato. Naturally, they lost. Now here's my theory: if King Piccolo hadn't wiped out the martial artists during this time, then the people of Earth would be more knowledgeable about ki and how to utilize it. and maybe they would have significantly higher power levels by the time the series starts. But what do you all think? Slug is the greatest villain in the Cartoon Network multiverse Villainous. This is split into 2 parts, but same outcome in the show Villainous. Dr. Slug is the right hand to Black Hat, the most powerful villain ever. That may sound like it hurts my case, but the whole reason Black Hat started the villain company was because he retired from typical villainy. Because of that, the position for #1 villain is wide open. Why can't Black Cat's henchman take the role? Slug is the perfect candidate for the #1 villain. He's patient, intelligent, and can be pretty sadistic, if given the chance. Also repeatedly beaten up by his bosses and superheroes actually gave him a resistance to the point he bounces back from being ripped apart. We also know he has a high level of infamy from episode 6. I also want to take a moment to look at his family. We've only ever seen part of a picture, and it's been rumored that his enemy, Goldheart, is his brother. If that's true, I think it'd give Slug an advantage, since he got hints of the Inside Man in the form of Goldheart. He'd know basic hero training, techniques, and a few identities. What do you think? Regardless of religion, Has-Been has an interesting plot. One thing stands out, though: how could the main characters survive the Angels, and how can you kill a soul? If anything, Charlie and her friends should have been the first thing the Angels targeted. Charlie is the daughter of Lucifer, the Angels' biggest enemy. Plus she has spent time making a hotel, which would take time and effort, especially since most of the people there refuse to help. Fan works say that the Angels don't go after royalty, but that doesn't explain the other main characters. The fact that Angel, Vaggie, and Alastor can fight would make the Angels hate them more. Plus, how are the Angels killing sinners anyway? They're killing souls. One of the things that got me thinking was how in Helluva Boss episode 4, the cherubs seem terrified at the idea of the wrongful death, which you think working with the place constantly at war would wear out. Also, I noticed how the sinners reacted to the death of their comrades. They seemed delighted. Even if they are sinners, odds are at least one person, other than Charlie, who is horrified. Then I looked at the deaths in general, heads without bodies. This is brutal, but could also be painless, if done professionally. Hear me out: if a redeemed sinner dies in hell, they go to heaven. This would explain why they wouldn't attack Charlie or her friends, since angels and God generally see the future in multiple stories, and they are usually described as loving humans. Guess what the sinners are? Dead humans. The reason why I say this is because of the Tournament of Power. That being said, this is 3 hypotheticals all rolled into one. It's important to note that every universe has a god of destruction, an angel, and a supreme Kai. It seems like this is held constant throughout all the universes. And if this holds true for all the universes, it should hold true for the primary leadership, aka the Grand Minister, Zeno, and the absent god of destruction of all. It could be argued that because of Zeno's absolute power he doesn't need to have a god of destruction, but if the tradition of each universe's hierarchy stems from the main hierarchy, there should be a god of destruction of them all. The first time that Roshi fights during the Tournament of Power, not only does Beerus and Whis look absolutely shocked, because his fighting style resembles that of somebody they once knew or knew of, but so does the Grand Minister. On top of that, it is well known that Master Roshi is old, very old. Basically, Roshi is older than just about everyone there except for Zeno and the Grand Minister, and he's been faking it, because he's been looking for his replacement, so that leads into the next two hypotheticals. The first is Beerus is looking for an apprentice, and that apprentice is Vegeta. Vegeta's personality seems to fit better as Beerus's apprentice, which would eventually make him the god of destruction of Universe 7, but Goku is the main character. You say, what's the whole point of the story, if he isn't going to be the god of destruction of Universe 7? Well, the story comes full circle at the very end of Dragon Ball, when Master Roshi reveals to him that he is going to be the next god of destruction of all. It may be really strange, but in proposing the idea that Earth in Pokemon is hell, sort of. Basically God, Jesus, or what have you, finally came down to take those worthy up to heaven, while leaving everyone on Earth to feel the wrath of hell. Basically, everyone in Pokemon currently is those who weren't worthy, so they remained on Earth, as hell and demons unleashed upon them. Yes, the demons being Pokemon. Just hear me out. It sort of connects, if you think about it. Some Pokemon are incredibly dangerous and have power capable of monumental destruction. Now no, I'm not saying that Pokemon is demonic or satanic, but I'm saying maybe something similar to what the Bible predicts is happening in the Pokemon universe, that the Earth on Pokemon is hell, some dangerous Pokemon running rampant, and organizations like Team Rocket, Plasma, or even the Pokemon War. Always creating conflict, world-threatening destruction in almost every movie and season, not a peaceful place. Now, I know these demons, as I propose them to be, are in fact quite cute and friendly like Pikachu, but I'm saying that this rapture happened on their Earth a very long time ago, so by the time humanity advanced to where we see them in the show, the Pokemon are tamed, most of them. I'm not portraying that whatever God creating these demons intended for them to crave death and chaos and have a conscience for it, rather that they are untamed beasts that are simply too wild to leave humanity in a peaceful world, and that is the punishment the unworthy get. However, this God simply shut them out on Earth to never interact with them again, leaving Earth in its misery, not caring what happens. But over time humans and Pokemon began to coexist. This is also kind of backed up by the fact that small Pokemon, Pikachu, Squirtle, Eck, and big Pokemon that evolved from small Pokemon are more tame, because they are not as dangerous and adapted to human civilization by the time they are at their most dangerous evolution. However, big Pokemon with no smaller evolution would be harder to tame, mostly legendary, because of how powerful most of them are, thus equaling less big Pokemon wandering civilized are. It makes sense as to how these Pokemon could rip humanity apart, and it looks like they already completely wiped out every other previously existing animal. If this happened a long time ago, humanity had little defense, the Pokemon were completely wild, and we all see how devastating some Pokemon can be. Just read some Pokédex entries, but humanity used their best tool, intelligence. I exactly know how they survived, but most likely running from the initial Pokemon invade. Now, since Pokemon are animals, they need to adapt as well, so over time humans marked out what areas or biomes had the most dangerous Pokemon and started civilizations in areas with the least amount of recorded Pokemon species, eventually becoming advanced enough to change landscapes, fight back, and control some Pokemon, whether through punishment or food bribes. I'm assuming the Pokemon got smarter as well, some adapting to coexist with humans as to befriend them to get a share of food or something. Maybe legendaries are so rare as because by the time humanity had a lot of Pokemon under control, they strategically killed as many of the most dangerous Pokemon as possible, and they are now in hiding, and that is why certain Pokemon are so rare. So yet, this idea just popped in my head randomly, and the more I thought about it, the more it made sense, so I had to write it down before I forgot about it. Now, I'm not a Pokemon fanatic, so I don't know a whole lot, and I imagine the lore will shut this theory down, but it was a fun little rabbit hole while it lasted. Please let me know what you think about this theory, and if the lore completely shuts it down, any loopholes, or if the lore supports this. Think about it. In each episode, Brain makes a plan and then gives an extremely simple, yet fundamental task to Pinky, who usually manages to spoil the entire plan by doing something stupid instead of the task he was supposed to perform. We usually blame this to Pinky's natural stupidity and clumsiness, but I think Pinky is aware of the fact that, once Brain achieves world domination, he won't need Pinky anymore. Once in power, even if he wanted to, Brain would simply not have any use for Pinky. The people needed to achieve power are the same ones needed to keep it. Maybe, when it was all about operating a machine, Pinky could be of service, but once in power? Could Pinky be in charge of the Department of Finance? Housing? Justice? He is just a mouse. He doesn't have any knowledge about economics, climate policy, industry development, or any of that. Brain will then look for much more skilled advisors who can take care of each department. Both Pinky and Brain know that their objective is achieved, their partnership is over. There isn't place in politics for poor Pinky. So he won't let this happen, and will keep ruining any plan Brain comes up with. For those who don't know, Black Hyena is a trickster god from Xhosa and Zulu folklore. Since the word Jumanji is a Zulu for many effects, I figured that it would have to be a trickster from Zulu mythology, and thus came to this conclusion. Think of the most evil characters ever to appear on television. Hannibal Lecter, the Joker, or Professor Moriarty might come to mind. But these characters are so obviously fictional, and obviously bad. These are the villains. The heroes stop them. They get there just deserts. With few exceptions, they can reach through the screen. They are clearly both evil and fictional, and emulating the Joker seems both repugnant and fraught with consequences to most of us. But let us paint the picture of a different breed of fictional villain. A villain who is never stopped. A villain who mimics real life in a horrible, twisted way. A villain that the show itself paints as the protagonist. More importantly, a villain that has the rare power to reach through the screen. To inspire the show's more impressionable viewers. Enter Kalo. Kalo whines, manipulates and tantrums his way through a life that looks like the target audience's own. He's the one who solves the problem in the end, even if there is screaming along the way. 3 through 5-year-olds leave with the impression that the whining and manipulating is just part of moving through life. That Kalo's behavior should be emulated. Consciences was designed by, I think, Vortians, an intelligent species enslaved by the Irkans. It makes perfect sense that they design intentionally poor equipment for their oppressors, because they know the tallest are stupid enough not to notice. Think of the most evil characters ever to appear on television. Hannibal Lecter, the Joker, or Professor Moriarty might come to mind. But these characters are so obviously fictional, and obviously bad. These are the villains. The heroes stop them. They get there just deserts. With few exceptions, they can reach through the screen. They are clearly both evil and fictional, and emulating the Joker seems both repugnant and fraught with consequences to most of us. But let us paint the picture of a different breed of fictional villain. A villain who is never stopped. A villain who mimics real life in a horrible, twisted way. A villain that the show itself paints as the protagonist. More importantly, a villain that has the rare power to reach through the screen. To inspire the show's more impressionable viewers. Enter Kal-El. Kal-El whines, manipulates and tantrums his way through a life that looks like the target audience's own. He's the one who solves the problem in the end, even if there is screaming along the way. 3 through 5-year-olds leave with the impression that the whining and manipulating is just part of moving through life. That Kal-El's behavior should be emulated. Consciences was designed by, I think, Vortians, an intelligent species enslaved by the Irkans. It makes perfect sense that they design intentionally poor equipment for their oppressors, because they know the tallest are stupid enough not to notice. For those who don't know, Black Hyena is a trickster god from Xhosa and Zulu folklore. Since the word Jumanji is a Zulu for many effects, I figured that it would have to be a trickster from Zulu mythology, and thus came to this conclusion. Think of the most evil characters ever to appear on television. Hannibal Lecter, the Joker, or Professor Moriarty might come to mind. But these characters are so obviously fictional, and obviously bad. These are the villains. The heroes stop them. They get there just deserts. With few exceptions, they can reach through the screen. They are clearly both evil and fictional, and emulating the Joker seems both repugnant and fraught with consequences to most of us. But let us paint the picture of a different breed of fictional villain. A villain who is never stopped. A villain who mimics real life in a horrible, twisted way. A villain that the show itself paints as the protagonist. More importantly, a villain that has the rare power to reach through the screen. To inspire the show's more impressionable viewers. Enter Kal-El. Kal-El whines, manipulates and tantrums his way through a life that looks like the target audience's own. He's the one who solves the problem in the end, even if there is screaming along the way. 3 through 5-year-olds leave with the impression that the whining and manipulating is just part of moving through life. That Kal-El's behavior should be emulated. Consciences was designed by, I think, Vortians, an intelligent species enslaved by the Irkans. It makes perfect sense that they design intentionally poor equipment for their oppressors, because they know the tallest are stupid enough not to notice. Think of the most evil characters ever to appear on television. Hannibal Lecter, the Joker, or Professor Moriarty might come to mind. But these characters are so obviously fictional, and obviously bad. These are the villains. The heroes stop them. They get there just deserts. With few exceptions, they can reach through the screen. They are clearly both evil and fictional, and emulating the Joker seems both repugnant and fraught with consequences to most of us. But let us paint the picture of a different breed of fictional villain. A villain who is never stopped. A villain who mimics real life in a horrible, twisted way. A villain that the show itself paints as the protagonist. More importantly, a villain that has the rare power to reach through the screen. to inspire the show's more impressionable viewers. Enter Kalo. Kalo whines, manipulates and tantrums his way through a life that looks like the target audience's own. He's the one who solves the problem in the end, even if there is screaming along the way. 3 through 5-year-olds leave with the impression that the whining and manipulating is just part of moving through life. That Kalo's behavior should be emulated. Consciences was designed by, I think, Vortians, an intelligent species enslaved by the Irkans. It makes perfect sense that they design intentionally poor equipment for their oppressors, because they know the tallest are stupid enough not to notice. All you have to do is look at the game itself, including the opening history tidbit, and see why. Humankind went to war with monsters and overpowered them, and used their magic to seal them away. So right away we know that in the world's past, humans were aware of monsters and magic. This knowledge may not exist anymore, excluding one ending of the game, but even if the humans forgot, that knowledge likely inspired epic tales, which in turn became fiction, including anime and manga. Some aspects might be inflated or made up, such as giant robots and galaxy eaters, but most things would be fair game and can be seen within the colony below Mount Hevet from the monsters themselves. Other theories like this, but none that really sound plausible, so here's mine. Several hundred years before when Pokemon takes place, Earth is perfectly normal. Then an asteroid crashes to the ground. This is not just any asteroid though, but an alien spaceship. We see all this in anime, though the time of the crash is not stated. Here's the kicker. The asteroid/spaceship is carrying some extremely potent alien mutagen, which the aliens use to target evolved organisms for specific purposes. Unfortunately, no aliens actually survive the crash, only their servants do, and now the mutagen is seeping uncontrollably into the environment. Frankly, I think sufficiently advanced alien technology is the only semi-plausible explanation for seemingly magical abilities many Pokemon possess. Anyway, the alien mutagen starts twisting local flora and fauna into supremely overpowered versions of themselves, which quickly begin dominating their biological niches. Regular animals still exist for a while, which is why people in Pokemon world know what they are, but they just can't compete with the new Pokemon and their numbers rapidly dwindle. The mutagen even seeps into the soil, which is why you can dig up millions of years old Pokemon fossils and revive them. They were not Pokemon originally, just regular dinosaurs, but now they are. Either way, all this causes human society to basically collapse. Not only are there domestic animals and even some plants suddenly perfectly capable of killing them, but the environment itself has become increasingly hostile. Only people that survive are those exposed to mutagen themselves, which, in their case, rather than giving them powers, just made them incredibly resistant to those powers. This is why people keep referencing animals in Pokemon, but we basically never see them. At this point they are either very rare or completely extinct. This is also why people send 10-year-olds out to gather Pokemon and risk their life. Earth is basically a death world at this point, and kids need those skills just to survive. States that Candy Woman is the queen of Candy Island and is the only being permitted to be there. This is why Flapjack and Canarcles can never reach it, because whenever they do go out to search for the island, they can find it but never land on it, because it self-relocates. This is due to how they can sometimes be seen talking to the bartender Peppermint Larry about searching for and finding Candy Island. Because Candy Woman is his wife, it would only make sense he would tell her, that's taking into account, when she's not there listening to Canticles herself who is in love with her, showing how she's been the reason that they'll never reach it, because she won't allow it, because she's always in contact with the island via telepathy, and thus it's always moving its location, making it nearly impossible to track or find. This theory would like to also state that Candy Island is a specific type point of island, a floating island. This is why it's constantly on the move, making it that much harder to find and land on. And if need be, she would by unknown means telepathy, because she's a candy person, contact the island, which is connected to her consciousness, and relocate itself. This theory would like to claim that the island itself is sentient and connected to Candy Queen, as stated earlier, so sentient that it may be able to act on its own, but out of hierarchy, is at her command. Think of the caste system, for example kings, knights, peasants, etc. Making Candy Woman, Candy Queen reason, because similar to a corporation tearing down a forest for profits, Candy Woman knows Canticles will just take advantage of the situation and profit from the land of Candy Island, only to then create a situation where all the sailors and dock members alike are profiting from Candy Island so much that it deteriorates the quality of the environment of the island. She knows this, because it's hinted at in the show that Candy Woman and Canticles do have somewhat of a relationship behind her husband's back, allowing for her to reveal to herself Captain Lanicle's motives towards Candy Island, since it's one of the few things he always talks about. She also fears that due to his candy addiction, he would overdose. This theory would like to conclude by saying that Candy Woman is really Candy Queen, and is 110% a master manipulator like Plank from Ed, and Eddie through her mastery of stillness and Sylph's other notes. She may be a deity within the show, for we see extreme forms of physics being performed, that is the moon's gravity comes into effect. In order to literally prevent Canticles and Flapjack from falling onto Candy Island but close enough to where they could still see it. This interference from the gravity of the moon in the reaching of Candy Island by Flapjack and Knuckles shows some form of central importance to their world. Like it's a godly world, observing mortal life. An observatory disguised through candy, so none of the characters would be the wiser, even if they did manage to stumble upon Candy Island. Match for evidence towards her godhood will fill in later, but until then, here's a short summary. We see Candy Queen appear in both 3D and 2D within the show, implying that as a part of her godhood, she has the ability to warp reality, specifically the form that she chooses. Whether it's the common 3D image we commonly see of her, or here rarely seen 2D animation, it becomes apparent that Candy Queen is more capable than originally thought. Alvin is the embodiment of Satan. The two are the same entity. Theodore and Simon help Alvin torture Dave. Dave has a strange energy which we see is used when he shouts out his catchphrase. Alvin needs this energy to break the rules of reality and breach the multiversal wall and gather all Alvins from alternate worlds to overthrow the Hebrew god. This also connects to the Norse mythological tree of life. That is where Alvin was created and where he rebelled, which caused the three to fall, as seen in the first CGI movie. The ship eats our vessels to reproduce Alvin and create more henchmen. This is part 1 of 2. I'm still figuring out the Alvinist cult and how it connects to the best headman. Okay, so Chris, he isn't real. Like, the body is real, but Chris, as a person, doesn't exist. This mostly steps to what a vessel really is. I looked up what a vessel defined meaning and I got large bone and blood vessels, but then I went with another option, the Bible. I googled and got some quite interesting verses that might remind you of something. Isaiah 64:8. But now, O Lord, you are our Father, we are the clay, and you are our potter, we are all the work of your hands. Acts 1:19. But the Lord said to him, Go, for he is a chosen instrument of mine to carry my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel. Hosea 8:8. Israel is swallowed up. Already they are among the nations as a useless vessel. Each verse seems to connect to the process of the vessel creator at the very beginning of chapter 1. Isaiah 64:8 is the building part where we, the actual God to this game world, build a form for the vessel. Acts 1:19 is the naming part, where the player names the vessel, usually using their name for it. And last, Hosea 8:8, which feels very similar to the part where the vessel we made gets discarded, as there's already a vessel made for Deltarune, Chris. So the vessel was discarded, making it useless. I know what you'll say, but Chris rubs his soul and like Josephine, that means he's real. Oh, my poor baby. Let me introduce you to someone you're quite familiar with. Frisk. I'm not going to explain who they are, since all of us know what Undertale is. So let's get to the point. They really don't have a personality, like, at all, and they have a red soul, and with Deltarune, we know it's really justice. So that would mean that Frisk is a vessel. So then why does Griffith have the soul then? Chara. The one ripping us out is Chara. I mean, seriously, red eye, creepy smile, and flipping summons a knife out of nowhere. That's Chara to a T, and we know she's aware of us, and we even made the deal with her for Pete's sake. And because of that deal, it was our fault for allowing Chara to get into Deltarune. Also, this twist is up in Toby's ally. What do I mean? Okay, like, the reveal of Chris never existing would be a surprising twist and subversion on the forcing a video game character against their will trope. Wait, is that a real trope? And his games are known to subvert everything, even subverting subversion itself, and I didn't even know that was possible. So, in conclusion, Chris never existed, and you wasted your time simping over a child we not unintendingly enslaved. B. Chara is at it again, either working with Gaster, the Knight, or as the Knight. IDKC. Toby is 100 meters from your location and approaching rapidly. Start running. In Dragon Ball, Ki is the basis of everything. Every ability in Dragon Ball is dependent on Ki Shenron reality warping, Goku instant transmission, Master Roshi Mafu fast healing Buu candy beam, Goldo time stop, Beerus Hake, hit time skip. You get the point. Ki is the source of all hexes in Dragon Ball, making it one of the most versatile and broken energy in fiction. So, it's completely possible that higher Q would also give higher hex resistance, as Ki is not just exploding energy but a hex energy too, giving its user resistance to hex. In the UGI crossover movie Bonds Beyond Time, the protagonists from Deutschmarks, GX and 5BS team up to defeat a time-traveling villain during the movie's climactic children's card game. Jaden pulls off a clutch move playing Flute of Summoning Kuribai, so Yuji can use Kuribai's special ability to reduce all incoming damage to 0 and saving the game. This movie takes place in Yuji's timeline before the end of the series. In the first episode of UGI GX, our new protagonist Jaden literally runs into a grown-up Yuji on his way to the intake exam of Duel Academy, and Yuji gifts Jaden the card Wing Kuribai. This card turns into a staple of Jaden's early deck, and because of it the school lunch lady gives him the support card Flute of Summoning Kuribai. Yuji saves his own life by giving him a card to build his deck around. I doubt I'm the first to think this one, and to be fair, the very text of the show makes it highly unlikely, but it's fun to think about. What if orcs have been around for a very long time? All the myths and legends, vampires, werewolves, cryptids, the God's Act, were all the result of individuals with quirks, and the stories got overblown and twisted over the centuries. Adventure Time takes place in a post-apocalyptic, post-human future where science and magic exist side by side. The Earth itself is shattered from the Mushroom War. It's not hard to imagine that, as super science and magic develop, they will eventually be able to heal the planet, but that it will look very different from the Earth we know. Steven Universe seems to take place in a world which does not have any familiar socio-political structures. In fact, from what we've seen of the world, it is largely decentralized, with no large military forces, no nation-states, and only a handful of large urban centers. We have seen that post-humans like Onion are not considered unusual or freakish. The existence of aliens does not cause widespread concern or alarm, and magic is taken matter-of-factly. If Steven Universe is actually what the Adventure Time world becomes over a very long period of time, then it makes perfect sense that transforming magical lesbian gem people having a war across the surface of Earth would then shake people's beliefs to their core.